So, does Apple pay for reviews for any coverage? And that's not just what snarky commenters ask in basically any halfway positive iPhone video anymore. It's what creator economy go-tos Colin and Samir asked in their latest video, and for two big reasons. Wait, hold on. Nerd alert, spoiler alert. You should click off now or go get a snack and beverage because this one is going fully indoor baseball and it's going long. Because two big reasons. One, so much Vision Pro. And not just from Marquez and Justine and the other top tech creators that you'd expect, but crossing over to the likes of Casey Neistat and Ryan Trahan and just the kind of high-profile creators and numbers that grab mainstream and meme stream attention. And two, other big tech companies absolutely sponsor content. They do it all the time. Samsung, Google, Intel, Qualcomm, and more accessory and services companies than you could shake a Silicon Valley season 1 finale at. So what about Apple? They asked, and I feel like I can answer because prior to starting work at YouTube in 2022, I covered Apple for 12 years, reviewing every iPhone since the 3G and every iPad, Watch, AirPods, and HomePod since the OGs. And I've worked in media and as a creator since 2008. And those can be two very different things because in traditional media, even online media, there was typically a wall between editorial and advertising, a firewall. If you worked as a reporter, reviewer, columnist, you didn't know what ads or sponsored content might run on or around your work. And that meant it couldn't really influence what you chose to cover or how you chose to cover it. Maybe big tech companies would end up, placing a banner on the review to farm low-hanging sales, or maybe a carrier or accessory maker would grab a popover because they just wanted to get in on the action. Or maybe the competition would do a full-on takeover to try and convince people to go the other way, just conquest advertising, whatever. None of us had any idea until we, like you, saw the ads for the first time. And that meant when it came to our choices and opinions, there couldn't really be any doubt. But the vast majority of creators are solo or have very small teams, and there's just no separation of editorial church and advertising state. No firewall, just a constant fire to pull views and pay bills. So creators, in the vast majority of cases, know exactly who is sponsoring a video, and in many of that vast majority of cases, personally pitch the sponsors or make content because the sponsors sought the creator out. In very sharp point of fact, influencers can even feel the exact opposite of traditional media. Not only not refusing to never not ever take any compensation for coverage, they can get all shades of sometimes very publicly hangry if companies don't immediately offer to pony up fat stacks of cheddar for anything and everything from an Insta story on up. Hell, press usually can't even buy a single share of a company they cover, but influencers can and do take full-on equity. So even for creators who go out of our way to never run sponsors that have any direct relationship to the topic of the video, or insist any paid coverage will be referred to as a showcase and not a review, or have ethics and disclosure statements a metric mile long, even though every creator is required by FTC regs to disclose any and all compensation, and every viewer whose hat isn't made entirely of tinfoil should be able to rely on those disclosures, but not everyone does, and some of those hats are like 10 tin layers deep. It means there can and will be doubt, always some level of doubt. Now, there is one enormous, giant, massive caveat to what I'm about to say, just the M. Night Shyamalan of plot twists. But in all my decade plus of covering Apple, in text and in video, I've not once seen or heard of them sponsoring a single post. Plaster ads on every billboard, bus stop, magazine, and website, yes. But directly sponsor a blogger, creator, influencer, not once, not in my time at least. And why is that? Because they currently they don't have to. Right now, at this epoch of tech time, Apple is the hottest person in the coffee line, at the bar, on the dance floor, wherever it is that we go not to have to swipe right in an app anymore. They just don't have to pay for it. It pays for them. Creators pay for them. Forget not flying creators out for a junket in Hawaii or Korea or wherever. People fly to Cupertino or New York on our own dime. Forget not giving out devices to all creators, which for Apple have to be returned. People line up for hours just to buy the devices and sometimes return them for refunds after. And let me know if you want my hot take on that one. And again, why? Well, Colin and Samir do some back-of-the-napkin Marquez math on the Vision Pro First Look video, assuming they say conservatively a $5 RPM, or revenue per 1,000 views, which on a 25 million view video would translate to $125,000 on a starting at $3.5 thousand device. Now, Marquez got a review unit from Apple, but knowing Marquez, he probably also picked up a dozen or so on his own dime for the studio team and probably the robots as well. But even so, that's way, way more than a healthy profit on his video investment, especially when you add in the millions of additional views from the additional videos. But almost no other tech creator is Marquez, and while I don't know his numbers, I do know mine. And the average RPM for the history of this channel when I was doing tech reviews was around $4 US. That's what my M1 MacBook Pro review pulled for a grand total of 1.2 grand, which not nearly as grand. And for my most popular review ever, the iPhone's 12 during the height of the darkest timeline, the RPM was $1.88, and I made a whopping $1,400, which would have only covered the price of the Pro Max, barely, before taxes and exchange. Because God, that international exchange. But my buyer's guide made $2,000, my buy now or wait for the iPhone 13 made $1,500, and all the other videos and all the not Apple and unrelated sponsors on all of those videos meant that if I hadn't gotten review units, I could still have afforded to buy and cover all of the phones myself that year, and in fact, most years. But not every creator could or can. Certainly not the ones who don't pull hundreds of thousands of views, let alone millions, or thousands of dollars in revenue, let alone hundreds of thousands for each and every one of those videos. Which brings me, time is a flat full circle, back to that major caveat, that big Shyamalan plot twist. Many creators would tell you access can be as valuable, sometimes more valuable, than sponsor dollars. There can be a very real equal and opposite reaction, which I'll get to in a second, but when you're making the biggest products, the ones that pull in the most views and make the most money, regardless of what scale that money's at, if you're going to events, if you're getting those sweet, sweet hands-on, if you're scoring early review samples, if you're getting your videos up first, when interest is at its highest, at its peak, some people think you won't ever risk that access, those views, that interest. So just like sponsorships, it creates a level of doubt. And some creators, those that don't have that access, get every bit as salty about it on social as commenters do in comments about money, saying you can't trust any review that's been sampled, even going so far as to spite pre-penned real, honest, and other superlatives to their own review titles just to cast that sour jelly doubt on the embargoed reviews, which I totally get. It took me like 8 years to get my first embargoed iPhone review from Apple, the XS, and I can reply in shorts about how that happened if anyone wants to ask me about it in the comments. But again, in my decade and a bit of covering Apple, all I ever felt from them was a desire for informed, objective reviews. Not to get all Simon Sinek about it, but they were very much playing the long game. And anecdotally, I'd hear grumbles that they felt someone was being deliberately erroneous or disingenuous just to bait those hot clicks, but also if they felt someone was being overly positive to the point it would strain credibility, negate the value of the coverage, and cause exactly the kind of doubt that we're talking about, which is where the equal and opposite reaction actually comes in. Because if you're big enough, if you're the tech reviewer for a paper of record or one of the most popular tech creators on the planet, the balance of power can and does shift. Hell, if you have a large and influential enough website or channel, it can even just even out. And as much as some people might assume a creator will always go easy mode on Apple to maintain that access, the mountainsides are also just as smote with the ruin of reviews that go hard negative just to suck up those abundant hate views, those tasty, tasty hate views, because that's what you risk when you tighten your grip. Some systems slip out, and some even realize there's way more money to be made going full-on Java, even if that's just as big and bad a violation of audience trust as going easy. And of course, no epoch of tech time lasts forever. BlackBerry was nearly impossible to deal with in the early days of smartphones when they were the ones on top. But once they got lapped repeatedly, they literally would send limos for coverage and make it snow sponsor dollars like a Waterloo blizzard while they lasted. So yes, the economics of being a tech reviewer can be great, but they can also be really tough. Gone are the days of captive COVID views for any nerd with a camera and an opinion. of just reading out spec sheets or cooking up hot takes. There's just too much inventory and not enough demand left for anything and anyone not providing consistent, unique, highly differentiated value to an audience, really satisfying an audience. Doing the work, whether that's developing the deep expertise, learning how to communicate that knowledge to a wide range of different people, or flipping the script entirely and coming up with something fresh and new, it's grueling. And as soon as you've done one device, you have to start all over again with the next one, not losing your passion or getting bored, even when many of the phones themselves are getting just so damn past boring, especially since nothing has replaced those phones yet in terms of broad appeal. Not Gen AI, which isn't something that can excite consumers the way a new hardware category can, at least not yet, and has basically been flooded by once and former crypto grifters, massively diluting the content space, and not by the Vision Pro, which is in limited, expensive distribution in one country right now, with video views that spiked and dipped more like a trend than a new evergreen topic, at least so far, which I know was also true for the first iPhone at launch, but we'll have to wait and see what happens as it gets reinvented into next generations and glasses and contacts and eventually maybe implants, who knows? But stone cold bottom line bet, both tech as a category and reviews as a format are going to need those next generations. They're going to need their own reinvention long before that happens. Basically, now. And if you want to see that video, the one I keep talking about, let me know.